Criminal Justice Committee come to order. Welcome, everyone. First, some housekeeping. Senator Huffman's going to lay out our committee rules.
I am.
They're standard rules that we've been governed by for as long as I can recall.
So moved.
Senator Huffman moves that we adopt committee rules. Is there objection? Chair has none. I guess we better call the roll.
Senator, sorry.
Yeah.
Senator Whitmire? Senator Huffman?
Are we calling roll or?
Yeah.
Here.
What?
And I.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, back up. Great idea. Clerk, call the roll.
Senator Whitmire?
Present.
Senator Huffman?
Here.
Senator Buckingham?
Rusty.
Senator Flores?
A little rusty.
Senator Hughes? Senator Miles?
Here.
Senator Perry?
Here.
There being 6 members present, we have a quorum. And now Senator Huffman will move that we adopt committee rules. Is there objection? I call the roll on that one too. Make everything formal.
Senator Whitmire?
Present. Yes.
Senator Huffman?
Yes.
Senator Buckingham?
Here.
Senator Flores?
Yes.
Senator Hughes? Senator Miles?
Yes.
Senator Perry?
Here.
Let me see on the agenda. There being 6 ayes, no nays, rules are adopted. Okay, members, today started out and still is an organizational meeting. We're going to hear from what I viewed as 4 of the more important criminal justice agencies, being DPS, the Commission on Jail Standards, Juvenile Justice, and TDCJ. I would call it this time the Juvenile Justice component, based on the importance of this agency and to get some discussion going along some of the recent publicity and some of the reports that have crossed all of our desks. So why don't we, and there's no special format, but I think it would be good if our Inspector General, Mr. Mitchell, if you'd come forward, Mr. Robinson, and Ms. Kane, why don't you come on up and we can have a good dialogue. First off, thank each of you for being here, and I really want to thank you for your public service. Ms. Kane, you, a little over a year ago, took on a huge responsibility, and I recognize it as such. And thank you for being willing to tackle it. When you took over, it was difficult, and I think it's still difficult if the facts that we're going to hear today are discussed. JD, thank you for your public service as our ombudsman. You're appointed by the governor, I understand.
Yes, sir. That is correct.
And you had a long, distinguished career in the DPS, including years as a Texas Ranger.
Yes, sir.
So that's good. And Mr. Mitchell, your background's law enforcement.
Yes, sir.
And you're our Inspector General who's hired for reports to the board, Juvenile Justice Board.
Yes, Senator, that's correct.
So we kind of have, and let me emphasize something right now. Since you gave your backgrounds and your roles with this subject, I want to emphasize we're all in this together. There's no home team, no visiting team. We all want the same. I think it's pretty good the way it was set up, to where you answer to the board. Ms. Kane, you obviously are hired by the board, and then Mr. Robinson, you report to the governor. So that's several layers of accountability and oversight. I think it'd be fair for me to take a couple of minutes and just point out to certainly some of the members that are new to the legislature and even new to the committee of the major changes that took place in 2007. Show Senator Hughes present. Senator Hughes, in 2007, TDCJ, TYC had gotten up to a population of 5,000. Coming out of the 90s, we were really, the Bush administration in particular, were holding young people accountable. And I was so involved with the adult system that I have publicly admitted several times that it was kind of out of sight, out of mind. They're in remote locations. It had gotten to 5,000, and we all woke up to a horror by a hard-working Texas Ranger discovered that out at Pyote, a TYC facility, the administrators, 2 of them, were taking young men out of their dorm in the middle of the night to the administrative offices and sexually assaulting them and abusing them. So, of course, all the sirens went off and we got busy. Jerry Madden was chairing criminal justice in the House. We had major reforms. Back then, anyone objectively would look and see, we're sending just any young person that was acting out in school. A lot of truants were there. A lot of car thieves were there. A lot of people that probably and has proven could be handled in their community. So we passed legislation that you had to be a felon, a convicted felon, to go to our current juvenile justice department. Changed the name of it, merged juvenile probation and TYC into the agency it is today. The good news is we went from 5,000 down to about 854 there and about today. I think, and you might say, well, where'd they go? They're being kept in the community, juvenile probation, layers of intervention, some faith-based, some, it's amazing, the juvenile justice crime is literally down, but in referrals to the state. But what we've discovered, and I think the testimony will show today, and certainly the documents I've furnished, now we have a very tough population. The young people that could be kept at home have been kept at home, and I would submit that the population that we're now responsible for at juvenile justice facilities are ones that have been deemed too tough and too dangerous to keep in the community. You have some that are on determinate sentencing, which means when they're 19 they'll go back to court to see whether they should be paroled or sent to TDCJ. Significant numbers go to TDCJ. Then you have indeterminate that are there at the judgment of the agency. I want to emphasize something that does concern me right off the bat, is that over half of the population of the 854 are 17 and 18, which was really, quite frankly, never discussed when we were reforming the matters. I would suggest they do not have a classification system, and on the same campus you may have a 12, 13, 14, 15, 16-year-old with 17 and 18-year-olds. So I think we need to question that model, and certainly I've got other issues, but I want to bring us at least revisiting the past in that the reduction in population was designed. It was supposed to be heavy on treatment, and unfortunately, I will admit, if we're not careful, they're still out of sight and out of mind because of their locations. It complicates things in terms of treatment, staffing, and otherwise. There's a number of subjects, but one that I want to put out, it bothers me greatly that Lee County, for instance, there's 5 locations. 3 other locations, members, if a youth is assaulted part of another youth or a staffer, injures them seriously, the agency takes them to the county jail and they're booked and then released to go back to the campus. You can only imagine how that person who's already shown to be a danger and disruptive is emboldened, probably legitimized as the campus tough guy, and as a result of this hearing and going forward, we need to make certain the communities that have these facilities know the seriousness of charging someone with assault, aggravated assault in some instances, and they don't want to keep them in the county jail. It's just mind-boggling. The testimony will show the 2 facilities that do keep them, the campuses have a reduction in assaults. So I could talk for the rest of the day about my concerns. There's been a lot of articles written about them. Two campuses have been covered. I think you can expect the other campuses. Kerry Blackinger with the Houston Chronicle, my local paper, has been given information by staff, families, some of the actual reports that the Ombudsman furnishes, and it's been brought to the attention of members of the legislature and the leaders of the legislature. So I want to have a hearing today on the operations with the idea that we can continue after today and work toward additional changes. I think we're just about at the population level that has got us to the point where each of these kids needs serious attention, a lot of mental health issues, and for sure many of them are dangerous. And I'll go ahead and say where I'm headed, and I want our witnesses to comment on it. I'm of the opinion, Ms. Kane, that it would nearly be impossible for anyone in your position to handle the model of being on a 180-acre facility such as Gainesville with 10, 12, 15 buildings with this tough population, and they have to go between buildings to go to class, dining, or recreation. I just think we haven't done our job to be more insistent that we relocate or redesign that model. And unfortunately, that's not just Gainesville, but it's most of our campuses. So I understand the challenge you have in the model, and at some point today, I'd like to make maybe a proposal, certainly a working group, to try to find a better model. So let's get started. Any member have any comment or question? I would like to ask Mr. Robinson, can you explain the function and how you turn these reports? And members, if you'll look in your package, we have actually reports. Got one today. Apparently there's widespread marijuana use at the MART facility. Apparently at most of the facilities they're getting tattoos, gang tattoo on their forehead or hands. Can you explain from your experience as the ombudsman and law enforcement, how does your staff go about discovering these things and the credibility of them? Because I read them, each and every one, and I'm alarmed, and each and every time, and I've shared them with the members, I've shared them with the governor's office. Can you explain the function of the ombudsman in terms of showing up on campus? Members, I would welcome you to read, if I could, the McLennan report that came out today. Right in the middle it says, staff are still working back-to-back 12-hour shifts, and several stated that they work anywhere from 12 to 17 hours at a time to there not being anyone to relieve them. One JCO staff reported she was working and urinated on herself as a result of not being relieved to use the bathroom. The superintendent reported that she was aware of the incident and its address. So that is alarming. Staying with McClendon for a moment, the understaffing is serious. So tell us the idea and concept of a good ombudsman report.
Mr. Chairman, Madam Vice Chair, members, J.D. Robertson, the Ombudsman for the Juvenile Justice Department. We conduct site visits at all TJJD secure facilities monthly. We also do a random check, one-day check sometime during the month as well. We visit these facilities. We conduct staff interviews. We conduct youth interviews. We set a goal to interview at least 10% of the population. We review their documentation, incident reports, and when we review the incident reports, sometimes we follow up with staff interviews to confirm certain things that have been reported in the incident reports, and then we compile a report based on that visit. And it's usually at a secure facility. It's usually a two-day visit with two ombudsmen working together.
Are your reports, in your opinion, credible? Is depicting an accurate, certainly site visit that day, what they found? For instance, the marijuana use, you tested some of the youth and they tested positive for it. That's a new wrinkle. I haven't, in all the ombudsman reports I've seen, there's a lot going on in these facilities, but the marijuana use is a new discovery. I assume it's a contraband that's gotten located at the facility. So in your judgment, or we'll get with the Inspector General in a moment, how in the world are we dealing in a state school that's supposed to be supervising the youth, and they're off using marijuana, not to mention gang tattoos on their forehead? I've actually had parents call and complaining about that they're coming home with gang tattoos.
And you are correct. So we make the observation on the tattooing. So we interview these youth offenders on a number of occasions from month to month. And in some instances, we'll document which tattoos they have, and we can tell if they have some new tattoos. So while we don't keep track of it as well as the Inspector General does, we do monitor that. So it's a concern for us as far as the gang issues in the facility, because it goes to the safety and security of the other youth offenders that are there. And as to the marijuana usage, we're showing that from documented incident reports. Mr. Mitchell, the Inspector General, can speak to the testing and to the number of cases much more better than I can.
When you report your ombudsman report, the staff level, is that positions that are filled and they may not be at work due to workman comp claims or injuries or sick leave, or do you count the people that are working at the facility when your staff shows up?
When the ombudsman reports the staffing in the site visit reports, they're reporting what the superintendent is telling them is available, and that could include the number of staff that are out for workman's comp claim or on alternative work assignments or out to FMLA. On the same token, we're making visual inspections of the dorm facilities, and what we look for is what is the ratio of the juvenile correctional officer to the number of youth on the dorm. So ideally we're looking for a 1 to 8. That's the standard industry practice, is 1 to 8. So when we see anything other than 1 to 8, 1 to 10 is okay. 1 to 12 is we're approaching the borderline that's not okay. And 1 to 14 and 1 to 16 is problematic.
Have you seen 1 to 14 or 1 to 16 at some of our locations?
Yes.
I assume that might explain why at Gainesville, which we'll go over in detail, but on your recent report says, one youth with a new tattoo said he used ink and a staple he sharpened with sandpaper to apply the tattoo. The tattoo was infected and the youth was seen in the infirmary to address the infection. Another youth from this dorm said that a staff member brought in a needle and gave it to the youth to apply the tattoo. He said the needle was passed around so that other youth who he named could also apply tattoos. One of these youth was observed with a new tattoo on his hand. The fourth youth's name were provided during the exit conference. How do you run across, I assume the staffing that you just mentioned, 1 to 14 or 1 to 16, allows the dark areas or the, I know we got video cameras all through the facilities, so where are they doing their tattooing?
Usually in the bathroom areas.
And I guess the staffing levels would make that highly possible.
Yes, sir. That is correct.
Okay. Is it, in your judgment, 1 or 2 campuses, or do you think we have these same issues, your ombudsman report, at all 5 locations? That would be staffing, contraband problem, tattooing, and drugs.
The contraband issue is more prevalent at the MARC facility in Waco. and again, the Inspector General can speak to this better than I can.
Sure.
They're taking over some of the entry and exit responsibilities at these facilities, which at Evans has made some significant improvements where they have taken that responsibility over.
Yeah.
They have not done that at the Mark facility in Waco as of yet, and I know they're working towards it, but that is a significant improvement that cuts down on the contraband. And you know, the ink issue, some gel ink from a gel pen can be used to barter for, you know, different things within the facility. So, you know, these things are all connected, all interconnected.
One other thing, how does your staff, if you want to go to the Evans unit, talk about gang activities? Says, members, if you look at the Independent Ombudsman report of January 15th from Evans, staff and youth reported that a campus-wide gang warfare between African American youth and Hispanic youth has been affecting the safety of all youth on campus. The youth reported that they are pressured to join a side or be assaulted. They reported that they do not feel safe because all the dorms are involved. Staff reported that the information to conduct hits or assaults is passed along during the education hours, as well as the security unit where youth from different dorms are mixed together. The issue is discussed in more detail in the following paragraphs. How does your staff determine that there's gang activity? Which let me ask you, is it unique to Evans, or is it Gainesville, or through the system?
Well, the first thing we have to realize is that our ombudsmen are interviewing youth and they're interviewing staff, and sometimes the two are using language they don't understand the full impact of.
Yeah.
So when they say a gang war, does that really mean it's all-out warfare? No, not exactly. So we have to take that into context. Are there gang issues within these facilities? Yes, there's gang issues at Evans. There are gang issues at Gainesville. And it is, as it's described, that it's sometimes for survival of these youth from different regional areas who are affiliating themselves for protection purposes. So we make these determinations based off these interviews and based on our observations.
Okay, I want to introduce this at this time so the members can get the gravity of this before I move to our Inspector General, who is in charge of kind of keeping the peace. Members, look at the Evans report and then look at Gainesville. This is a profile of this population. And if we don't do anything else today, we're going to establish that this is a very, very tough population. They're located in, quote, state schools, because that was a model that was adopted going back before the 50s. But that's when you would send a car thief or a truant or some just disruptive kid there. You have to be a convicted felon. And please look at Gainesville. Aggravated assault for several pages. And that is someone that's put a gun in someone's face. And the only difference between an aggravated assault and a capital murder is that they didn't pull the trigger. And I've talked to juvenile probation chiefs around the state. They think it's the gang activity that is what is creating such a large number of aggravated assault. We have other offenses, but including capital murder, I just opened the page to. So I just want everyone to know, all the stakeholders and the members to know, this is not a school in the traditional state like you would in our neighborhoods, and certainly not in the state schools. Now, and Evans is, I mean, that's very typical of all the institutions. Mr. Mitchell and Camille, you can certainly, if you want to interject yourself in the conversation, but I'm directing my questions trying to establish the problems we have, the tough population, and then how we can all work together to address that. Mr. Mitchell, how long have you been the Inspector General?
Just about 2 years, sir.
2? Okay. Well, I've visited with you on several occasions. You've got a tough job, and you answer, as I've mentioned, to the board. Do you have an occasion to tell the board members, your chair, and otherwise some of the findings that you've shared with me in terms of injuries to employees and youth and other relevant matters?
Yes, sir, Chairman. I brief the chairman of our board on a weekly basis, and then I present reports at our quarterly meetings as well.
I guess I've got so many notes, and I'm going to try to make this meeting as thorough but as concise as possible. Tell me what you perceive as our number one challenge in terms of keeping the youth and employees safe.
Well, as the chair highlighted earlier, one of the concerns that I have is that when you have staff who are assaulted by these most violent of offenders, and then I take them to the county jail and book them into the facility, and then they're released and returned back to the facility, that causes a dangerous environment, both for the staff and the offenders. So, some of our offenders have committed multiple assaults on staff, and that's very dangerous.
Do the youth, is there any accountability and I'll talk to Ms. Kane in a minute. How do you take an assaultive, dangerous youth back and put him in? I feel sorry for the youth that are going there trying to change, get some help, and go back home. I can't imagine the bullying that's taken place, the gang warfare, and so a youth that's had difficulty in the community sent here, how do you protect them from, particularly if you've got someone that's already assaulted, seriously injured an employee or another youth? You take him to jail, they book him and release him back to the campus. How do you protect any of the kids?
Well, I think it's a multifaceted approach. One thing that we have to closely do is work closely with the special prosecution and the local prosecutors in our jurisdictions, that we can highlight the most dangerous of offenders that are in our custody and move those prosecutions along. At the same point in time, we collaborate very closely with the state programs, and we advise them of the seriousness of some of the offenders, and we sometimes have to move some of those offenders to our more restrictive programs. I have a gang intelligence team that are commissioned peace officers, one located at each facility, and their mission is to interview these offenders and determine whether or not they are real gang members. And then we share that intelligence with other law enforcement partners and the agency as well.
When you have a chance, just want to ask on that issue. I have a question, sir.
Ma'am?
I have a question on that issue.
Senator Huffman.
Yeah.
Sure.
I kind of want to drill down on what you said about you. So they commit an assault in the facility, and you refer them to. So do you refer them to the prosecutor in the county where the facility is located, or do you go through a special prosecution? I think we need to hone in on where the ball is being dropped there, and I think Senator Whitmire is looking for solutions. So that's why I think we have to hit these problems, some of them one at a time. So we should be able to fix that.
Senator Huffman, it's kind of a mix.
Okay.
In our secure facilities, with our 5 secure facilities, we generally prefer those cases to the special prosecution unit.
Okay.
You might, excuse me,
No.
some of the members are not familiar with that special prosecution process. In other words, it's not the local DA. It's a state agency that prosecutes TDCJ and the juvenile justice violations.
Right. And so if they're dropping and I'm not blaming them, so nobody take this as somebody's fault or the other. I think we're trying to solve a problem. So if there is a weakness there, if they don't have enough staff, then those are the kind of questions, or that's what you need to let us know and Senator Whitmire know, so that we can assist you with what needs to be done to address these specific issues. Because if there is a juvenile who is assaulting staff, I agree. As Senator Whitmire made the point, if he's brought back to the facility, he's like a hero, So how do we should be able to fix that. That's not acceptable. So if it's because the local prosecutors don't want to do it, or it's a rural area and they don't have the staff, then we need to help them get what they need to fulfill those duties. Or maybe we say they all go to the special prosecutor, and we give them another staff member at the special prosecution level to specifically handle juveniles who assault staff, right?
But I don't think it's the prosecution we're handicapped or really in danger. It's that they won't confine the youth off campus.
Yeah.
I know I've actually heard that
Well-
Lee County says, no, that's a state problem. Now, they want the jobs, they want the facility, but they just don't want to confine them in their jail. So the prosecution's pretty aggressive.
Okay.
It takes time, but what do you do with the youth that's already injured another youth or employee? And you take them and it's catch and release down at the
Yeah, but
county jail.
who's making the decision to
The sheriff.
release them?
The sheriff.
Well, then it is a problem at the local level. Then,
Yes, ma'am.
I mean,
Did I
mean-
describe it accurately from your experience?
maybe I know.
Yes,
see
Senator.
Sheriff Lovebecker back
So
there. He probably didn't want me to say this,
There's
but
three that catch and release is the term that's used
Yeah.
in the schools, and 2 that do hold them. You can see remarkable changes.
well, maybe
And-
we
and one-
figure
one-
out how to make them hold them.
One, and I'm going to get back to some of the kids that are doing the larger number. Senator Buckingham, did you want to ask?
Sorry,
a-
just a quick question on that.
Sure.
I mean, I hear a lot from my 17 sheriffs that there are significant complexities with having juveniles in their jails. So at some point, maybe there's some stuff we can do to help address that issue, because I know it's a significant problem for them, because they have to
Sure.
be out of voice range, all kinds of stuff that makes it really difficult.
Senator,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And so I'm going to say this in a broader context. So obviously, of recent, there's been a revelation that we've got a problem. And I want to make sure as we go through this, and as this session unfolds, because I think this is going to occupy a large part of our discussion, if there's a work group and things, I need honest assessment. I don't need political assessment. I don't need, we really need to love on these kids if they're doing these kind of things, and not that we need to treat anybody disrespectfully or badly, but if a juvenile at this age has chose to endanger or hurt others, they've crossed over a line in some level. But what I want from y'all is not the answers you think we want to hear, be it in work groups or whatever. We need some honest assessments, because I don't know how you ever put a kid that's tried to kill someone either while incarcerated or outside to get into that situation and put them into a population and expect that to be a good thing. So maybe we didn't give you another room to put them in. Maybe we don't have another facility to take them to. But I want you clearly to be able to have the freedom to express real decisions, real solutions, and not perpetuation of irresponsible, very, very, very sad youth that have reached a level of this. And so I'd ask it in this way: what is the one thing, if you were to survey your population base, what is the one thing they value most that we could have some, and you don't have to answer today, but if you had any consequential actions that if they go down this road, they're going to lose A, B, C, D, or you're going to have this happen to you, and make examples, because at basic human nature, it's about survival. And if they know that there's real consequences for being in this situation that we're having to deal with today, I want to know what that answer might look like, if there's anything at all. But, tattoos and all of the things we're talking about, those are symptoms of a deeper problem for sure. But the reality of the day is we are putting kids into a situation to do harm to others that are innocent bystanders. And we've asked them to do that, and that's not acceptable. So I don't care if it's hard love. I mean, we need to have an honest discussion about what is really going to fix and prevent these kids from doing harm to the other kids that have just made bad decisions. They were stupid for a day. Chairman Madden, I grew up under his mentorship over in the House, and he had a say, and we're just trying to keep the guys that made really stupid decisions from having an impact on their life and separate them from the really bad people that we can't risk being in public anymore. And that's no different in the adult or in this new generation of juvies. So don't be reserved in telling us what you think might fix this.
thank you. Senator Huffman?
Yeah, I just have a quick legal question. I'm not sure I know the answer to it. So if a juvenile who's, well, let's say he's in a juvenile facility, but he's legally an adult, a 17 or an 18, he commits an offense, when you bring him to the sheriff or to the prosecutors, are they prosecuted as an adult or as a juvenile because they're in the juvenile system?
No, Senator Huffman, they're actually prosecuted as an adult if they're
They are.
17 or older.
Okay, so then that solves Senator Buckingham's question about them having to be held separate, so,
Particularly 17, 18.
yeah, so...
But the penal code's got them as adults.
Right, so they're adults, so they're prosecuted as an adult. So I think we've got to make sure we're not confusing issues here, so, and not letting people use excuses to not get things done that aren't really a legal excuse. And again, I'm just saying in general,
And
we need to,
we need to change.
yeah.
Why don't you describe the 92 that you've identified?
Yeah.
And I'll move beyond you in a moment, but I want you to, members, listen to this
That's why I asked.
real, live, what's going on. You've identified 92 for me. Describe what havoc and danger they're presenting to the institutions, its employees, and other youth. Give them the number of how many reports, the amount of workman comp payments, just from 92 disruptive kids, to be politically correct.
So the numbers I'm quoting from are from some of the OIG statistics from fiscal year 18. And there were 92 youth arrested by OIG in fiscal year 2018. Those 92 youth, their entire tenure in TJJD custody are responsible for approximately 5,000 use of force reports by TJJD correctional staff.
Now that means,
That's their entire...
go ahead. I just want to make sure my members know what is the use of force, that the staff had used force to apprehend them.
That could have been some sort of disruption. It could have been a refusal to move between locations or to come out of their cell, or it could have been a fight. It could have been an assault on staff.
5,000.
Whatever the reason was, there was a use of force used by TJJD employees involving those 92 over their entire time in TJJD. And as we have a transitory population that comes in and out of our facilities, of the 5,000, 2,844 of those reports occurred in fiscal year 2018. So more than half of those reports occurred just last fiscal year with the use of force on those 92 offenders. When we look at workman's comp claims for TJJD, there were 281 workman's compensation claims for youth aggression last fiscal year in 2018. When you take into consideration the amount of money with those workman's comp claims, add in industrial accidents, because that's how they're tracked, it totaled over $854,000 in workman's comp expenditures for youth aggression and industrial accidents. And finally, there were a total of 8,199 missed work days because of youth aggression and, again, industrial accidents in fiscal year 2018.
What about the issue of when an employee is injured on a campus? Is it my understanding that they can't be treated by your medical staff that works with JJJD? They actually leave the campus, go into town, and receive treatment. What's the logic there, or the rule making for that if you have medical technicians on campus, they can't treat an injured employee?
Do you want me to take this
Yes.
one? So all of our medical care is provided by UTMB, the University of Texas Medical Branch. They are under contract to serve our kids. That's the way it's been. We've had discussions about some expansion and other things. Well, we hope to work that out, but right now it's a liability issue for them. If someone comes to them and says, I've been hurt, then the next thing that happens is there's an automatic statement by UTMB, which is, I can't tell you whether you're hurt, you should go to the hospital. So what ends up happening is everybody goes to the hospital, to the emergency room, and gets checked. We have discussed, and haven't moved forward yet, but we have discussed talking about whether or not we need an EMT on each campus that's employed by us and not by UTMB, to be able to provide first aid, diagnostic, transport if necessary, make the call about call 911. or whatever it is that we need.
But I understand also they leave off campus to be treated, and then they most likely don't come back because they'll go file workman comp or use their sick leave, depending on not just necessarily the nature of their injury. It's just that's one way to not be in a dangerous environment.
That's right. It's one way to not have to be at work. Some of our folks come right back. A lot of our folks don't.
And when they do not come back, when you give your staff level reports, is it not true you're still counting that person?
So we count them in the FTE count, and the FTE needs portion of that includes a relief factor that's supposed to take into account sick leave, FMLA, things along those lines. But on any given campus, with differing cultures and differing habits, it can deeply affect our ability to meet that 1 to 12.
Ms. Kate, what does that mean, different cultures and different...
So at Giddings, it's much more likely that people buck up and come to work and are providing coverage. At MART, we have a much worse problem of that day call-ins, people just calling in sick. We don't have too many FMLAs there, but on any given day, because of a variety of cultural issues on that campus, I'm just going to call in because I really don't feel like being there today.
Okay, so
and that's wrapped up in a lot of
these are all,
things.
excuse me if I interrupt, but these are all state institutions,
Yes.
same state agency, same rules and regulations, training, etc. And you're telling me from campus to campus you have a different culture?
Yes. I mean, is it wildly different? No. But their morale is different on different campuses. The way the JCOs feel supported is different on different campuses. The way they're assigned to their jobs is different. We have plans in place to try to resolve all of those issues and make those things more standard and make them work better with standard job assignments so that you go to work every day for a team. It's really easy to call in sick. When you're just calling in on several hundred people, it's harder to call in sick if you don't need to be, if you're not really sick, on your tight little team. We move people around like chess pieces on a board instead of letting them have a team that they can.
You're talking about on an individual
staff.
Campus?
On any individual campus. So some of the campuses are better at having more stable standard teams in place, and some are not good at that at all.
The youth?
And
You're talking about the youth?
no, the staff.
Okay. Well, I pulled the Texas Administrative Code, which governs your. It says for a juvenile supervision officer to be counted in the facility-wide ratio, the officer shall be present on the facility premise at all times.
Yes.
And I read that because when I look at the Ombudsman report, often his staff levels are different than what we're getting from your office.
Okay, so
And I'm assuming
his
he
staff.
counts bodies that show up for work, and you count filled positions, even if they happen to be in the emergency room.
It depends on what numbers you're talking about. So if you talk about the numbers that are sort of near the top of his report where he's showing the strength, and I can let you answer this question, but those numbers are being reported from us by our facilities. They are budgeted numbers, not the operational management, not the operational staffing numbers that tell us based on the population of that facility how many people we actually needed in a given time. Is that?
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you, Ms. Mitchell. Ms. Kane, let me ask you a couple of questions. In fact, several questions. First of all, the one thing I was wanting to ask you early in the discussion is, you've got you're having a hard time keeping staff, if we
Yes.
we establish that. Too low. You and I have discussed that many
Yes.
times. Endangers the staff and the students. Why in the world, when you're looking at 3 members of finance on this committee that are doing your budget, why did you not ask for a raise? I understand your people start at $31,000, they take home about $1,800 a month, and most agencies we deal with, TDCJ, for example, raise salaries, but you've got people in Gainesville worried about it being closed, they don't feel safe, and they don't get a raise, and they take home $1,800. looking at your own number, you said 59% of the new hires quit in the first year.
Yes.
So where are our priority in trying to take care of our employees that are literally endangering their lives?
Yes. So within our base, we do have funds to provide a certain level of raise. What we don't have,
How much?
probably getting close to 60% equity with TDCJ. $2.8 million in addition, and I take credit for not putting that in the LAR, will give us equity with TDCJ, including their most recent request for a bump. If they don't get that request, then our equity level would drop about $450,000, making it a $2.4 million addition.
You think it's working conditions or salary or certainly both?
So when
I'm
we
taking your numbers. You said 44% of the hires quit.
for 6 months. So that in and of itself
let that
says
sink in.
it's not money.
Let's let that sink in a minute.
Yeah, it's big.
The people that you can hire, 44% of them quit in the first 6
Yes.
months. What happens to them after they get there?
Okay. So here's what happens. Here's what I inherited. I inherited a system that
No, we're talking about today. Oh, go ahead. If you want to talk about what you
yeah,
do.
I mean, I'm sorry. It's still, these things are still ongoing. We're trying to fix them, but a training program that I don't think fully prepares them for the real life, honest to God job that this is. They are given the basics. They get a lot of training, but it does not align, and we are working on it, but it does not align with what it's really like to be on a dorm with really acute, really dangerous, really volatile kids. And so from a money standpoint, those people knew what the job paid when they took it. It's that when they got on the job, they went, oh, I didn't know it was going to be like this. And so they cut out early. We need
44% of them in 6 months.
so 44% of the people who quit, not 44% of our people, but 44% of the people who quit in the first 6 months.
Yeah, okay, 40% quit.
Was it 40? Oh, 40, sorry. I'm even bumping it up. It's the working conditions. Now, the raise,
Can I ask something?
Yeah.
And we'll get in a minute, and I don't think you can raise all these issues if you don't have a proposal, which I'm going to get to in a moment. What in the world can this committee and this legislature and the state's leadership do to help you attract and keep employees when we've heard the dangers of working there, very low pay? So I guess I get frustrated that you don't have a shout out that you need. I mean, you haven't even asked for a budget increase in finance. We're marking up your budget as we talk, and I look at my colleagues and I said, I know they've got staffing problems. I know it's dangerous. They're not even asking for a raise. I'm frustrated by that.
okay, and I absolutely understand that. As we worked on this in October, the main problems that we were seeing was the early attrition. Money won't solve that. As we've moved forward over the next...
How do you know? Would it help?
Because
Would
if you
it help?
take a job at a certain price point and then you quit 4 months later, it's not the money that made you quit unless you got another offer, in which case you're going anywhere. Anyway, this job is hard. These kids are hard. The place is really difficult.
I would start with asking for a raise for them.
Okay.
And then number two, I'd go to the leadership and say, I can't protect my employees or the staff in the configuration of these campuses. I mean, we don't run the agency. I'm here reaching out to you, urging you one more time. If you will tell us what you need, then it's our responsibility. But when you get in an argument with the press, for instance, Gainesville, did you have a riot or did you have a disturbance? I think getting into semantics is not productive. If the press reports a riot because for 6 days the kids were out of control, one got the key of the staff, it started allowing other students to be released. For you to put out a press release kind of downplaying it, you'll never fix a problem if you don't admit we have one.
Okay, we have one. I have never said we don't have one. That press release was because the headline of that article said we had a 6-day riot. To me, a 6-day riot means 6 days of full rioting. That we lost control of that campus for 6 full running days.
That's not...
That's how we read it. That's how a lot of other people read it. When I asked people what they thought that. If that was the wrong
Did you have a serious disturbance? Did it last more than several days?
We had several events in limited time each evening over 6 days.
Did kids get out of control at some point?
They ran around the campus, they climbed trees, they climbed up on roofs, and then they
Were people
and then
injured?
They went back.
Was there like 33 out of your 160 that are located there? And did you use pepper spray to apprehend them?
In some cases, yes.
What does a small, innocent youth do that finds himself in that environment?
What happened
Or
was...
a staff person that finds himself in that environment? I mean, it just sounds to me like total chaos.
Okay.
No, not okay. I want you to tell us what we can do to help.
Okay. We have, and you said it pretty eloquently earlier, we have kids, 80% of them committed a violent crime or a crime against person. Serious mental health issues, 44% are identified at intake. That's twice what it was 4 years ago. A year ago, we had 2,400 suicidal ideations, suicide attempts. Our attrition's through the roof. We inherited 5 facilities in rural jurisdictions where the staffing ratios aren't good. 3 of our facilities are running 75%, even when you don't consider on any given day how many people call in sick. That's 75% if everyone shows up to work. In order to make that work, the staffing ratio and the population have to somehow balance. Our plan is to continue dropping the population of those 5 facilities. We do that by providing other alternatives.
Can I interrupt you?
Yes, sir.
The violent kids that we're talking about, and I hate to call a 17, 18-year-old kid, your confinees, how do you release them with the profiles they have before they're ready?
I'm sorry, can you explain what you mean by before they're ready?
Okay. You said you release. Who determines a armed robber when he is released?
We have a release review panel where at least 3 people review that case and
is it possible that because of your low staffing that you might be releasing some because you don't have the staffing to supervise them?
I don't believe that's true.
Did you not tell me in my office a couple of months ago when I was talking about downsizing Gainesville to get control of it, you told me you would, but you had nowhere to take them because of shortage of staff?
That is correct.
Now think about that for a moment. And that's where I'm frustrated that you're not reaching out to the leadership for help, because you need help. I understand that, and I want to help. But if you can't reduce a campus that you can debate whether it's a riot or a disturbance, to downsize its population until you get control of it, because you can't take 20 kids to Giddings or Brownwood or Evans. You told me you're maxed out for what the staffing levels will
Right.
manage.
With 854,
Yeah,
854, it's 830 something today. It'll bounce back up to 870 at some point. Yes, right now we're pretty maxed. There are Giddings and Evans.
So do you ever relieve somebody that's before they're ready as a staff management issue?
That is not our plan, and I don't believe that that's happening. That we're literally letting kids go when we know that that's not okay.
Well, if you don't have any room at other your 4 facilities because of staffing shortages, I would think when you try to manage a disturbance by getting some off of that campus, maybe even the troublemakers, but you tell me that you can't do it because you don't have the staff to do it, we got a real crisis.
Yes. And that's why we want additional alternatives to continue to lower our population. I like the idea. Y'all have a work group. We would love to support that in any way to see whether our strategy or any other can be built upon, can be added to, can meet your needs. We are happy to work through it. The fact of the matter is these facilities are not doing well. They are hard to manage, and they are hard to manage given the factors that we have. They are ripe for all kinds of problems. That's absolutely true. We need your help. We need to be able to lower the population of these facilities until the staffing ratios can make
But
sense.
see, you just said we need to lower the population if appropriate. I will be willing to...
Our request includes money to help lower the population.
Okay, let me... Senator Flores.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members. Director Kane, I understand. I sense your frustration.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. It's visible. But the question I have, of course, I'm looking at the 18-year-olds that are offending. You said 5,000, 2,500 in the last year. Are these new felonies being committed in the unit?
Yes, sir. Yes and no. The 2,800 include all types of offenses that could be...
Let's just say the felonies.
Okay,
The
so
felonies committed by 18-year-olds, new felonies, while in the unit. What's the process for a newly committed felony by one classified by the law as an adult? What does it start there?
Okay, Senator. One of the things that happens is that I run an incident reporting center, which is a 24-hour hotline which takes calls and complaints and incident reports from juvenile correctional facilities all over the state. When a staff is assaulted by a youth and they're injured, a report comes into the IRC, and it will get assigned to one of my criminal investigators who's assigned to that facility. My investigators will respond to the facility and conduct an investigation of that assault. When we've reached sufficient probable cause to make an arrest, we will go get an affidavit for arrest from a local magistrate, and then we'll book that 17 or 18-year-old into the county jail for, in most cases, the assault on a public servant, I believe, is a felony 3.
Yes, sir. And so should they be convicted? How many of them get convicted?
I don't have those numbers right in front of me, but
Let's just say an 18-year-old that committed a new offense while in your facility as an adult. Do they get to stay in the juvenile facility, or if they then gets resentenced to an adult penitentiary?
Generally, all of the offenders that we've charged with assault on a public servant, they will all get sentenced to TDC. Now, some of my cases are dismissed because they're taking multiple cases into consideration when they do one potential plea bargain for one offense. In other words, I could have an offender who might have committed 3 assaults on public servant. They'll only prosecute the one.
So this question I posed to all 3 of you, if I may, Mr. Chairman.
Sure.
What does the ideal TJJD facility look like to you, and how do you propose to address to get to that?
To me, if I can start, a good facility is low population. A good facility has adequate staffing to be able to meet a 1-to-8 or better than 1-to-8 ratio. Special populations need higher than that, 1-to-4. We find girls need a better supervision level than that. Those should be a combination of, in a perfect world, contract care facilities that are frankly cheaper than what it costs to do it at the state level, who are designed specifically for this high-end, risky population and are paid the rates that are necessary to keep those kids. Combined, at least in the short term, with the facilities that we have, which are much less populous and much more easy to manage. But if I had a magic wand and could somehow manage to make the contract care providers just show up and build these things tomorrow. If we could get past the NIMBY issues immediately, I would love to have smaller facilities arranged in urban areas that we can deal with. What we're trying to do is lower the population through lower commitments first, provide release valves for the system in the form of contract care so that we can lower the population on the existing facilities. If we want to go faster than that, we can, but there are limits. Additional contract care beds in 48-person pods are going to run about $8.5 million a piece for the biennium. We could probably do 3 of those facilities if that is the will of this group. That would, in combination with additional probation, naturally lowering commitments, and the additional 48 bed, that would get us down 250 kids. I think JD would agree that at that point we've got a population that, at least in our facilities, is at least manageable and able to move forward so that this body can decide whether that model is something that you want to keep or that model is something that you want to move ahead from. And then you got to determine how much you really want to invest in TJJD in bricks and mortar for the long haul, or whether we want to focus on trying to use as much contract care and privatized facilities as possible.
Mr. Mitchell, what would your answer be to that question?
Sir, my philosophy is that I want to provide a safe environment in all of our facilities, and a secure environment. And that means that I have to hold both the staff and the youth accountable for criminal offenses that occur in our state secure facilities, in our contract care facilities, and in our county facilities. So I want to make sure that we hold both the staff accountable if they use excessive force, and I, at the same point in time, want to make sure that the youth are held accountable if they're assaulting staff, to provide a safe environment. I also, in the state secure facilities, we want to make sure that we reduce as much as possible the contraband and the gang activity that's coming in. And so we're working very hard towards that. And I think all of those play a key role in making TJJD a better environment.
Mr. Robertson, what would you
Thank you, Senator. Yes, I would agree with Ms. Kane and Mr. Mitchell on most of those issues. The problem is we've got to have something immediate. The population level of the 5 secure facilities and the staffing levels are causing an issue. So you have to be able to provide a way to relieve some of that pressure, and the immediate way to relieve that is to reduce the population of those 5 facilities to a manageable number. Where are you going to send them? That's going to be the issue. When you take a look at the facility at Gainesville, Ron Jackson and Brownwood and Giddings, those facilities were built in the 1950s as schools, not as correctional facilities. They don't have any cross-fencing inside the facility to control the movement of the youth offenders, and that becomes a problem. When you're moving 30 youth across campus and they decide that 10 of them are going to fight, you got an issue. You got a bad issue in a hurry, because now you've got youth offenders running everywhere and very limited control. So when you talk about an ideal facility, you've got to have some measure of control outside as well as inside. And then you've got to have the right ratio of staff to youth offenders.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What I heard was basically that you need to have your staff better trained, better paid. You need infrastructure that is more conducive to a correctional facility than a school at this point with this population, and that you need to be able to address issues when they go outside of the fences, and being able to handle the disciplinary and or corrective action more effectively and efficiently. Is that what I heard you say?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Senator Huffman.
Thank you. Ms. Caney, so you keep emphasizing, and I think you mentioned also, sir, about reducing population. But how, with the reforms that were made in the past, there's been significant reduction in population of this, this group. And as Senator Whitmire pointed out, as I look at these offenders, at their age and the seriousness of their offense, I believe that they're in the secure facility for a reason. I mean, it concerns me that I'm worried about, of course, the welfare of these young people who are sent to the state facilities, but I'm also worried about public safety. So I think that has to be a concern that we have here. So just reducing population to reduce it, to make it more convenient for your agency, because you can't fulfill what you're supposed to be doing. And I'm not blaming you personally.
No.
It's just not working.
But I do want to be clear.
Today is ridiculous.
There's a natural amount of additional kids that the counties can take, and there's a limit to that. And
but
we're not talking
which beds. There are no beds out there for them. I mean, there are other agencies competing with these contract beds.
And
there's DFPS. There aren't enough contract facilities out there that can provide the level of attention and security. Thank you. It's not just about treatment with these individuals.
No, absolutely.
It's about security for the staff who are trying to treat them, and the medical professions who are trying to treat them, and for them to be probably protected from themselves, for the ones that have suicidal ideations, okay? So I get it. They're a very complicated group of individuals. Is there a way to reduce the population by sending them on to TDC? Jay?
Sure. For the ones who are creating all the ruckus, so to speak.
Are you doing that?
No.
We're prosecuting them, yes.
How come they keep coming back and
sentence? Can't you go back into court
Yes.
with a determined sentence, kid? You don't even have to charge. All you got to do is take him back to his hometown where he was sent from, and if it's determined sentencing, you can just essentially revoke him from what he was sent to your facility for in the first place.
Yes.
So
Our determinate sentence kids cause the least amount of ruckus on our campuses.
But they cause some.
Okay.
And you're saying, though, you need to reduce population so that you can handle the ones that are the worst. So
yes. And so that's why we want the release valves. We need more places.
What's a release valve?
We need contract care to be able to spread the kids.
But contract care just doesn't appear. I mean, it's just not
It does
there.
if we pay the right rates and we work directly with vendors.
How many do we send out of state already? Now, this is a whole new subject that we'll develop at the next meeting. Tell the committee how many Harris County, Dallas, and rural students that have been referred from a juvenile probation department to your shop are currently out of state. And
The number of
And then somebody tried to explain to me why you got to send Texas kids to Pennsylvania, Arizona, New Mexico at a tremendous rate.
Not from us.
What's the number today?
So you
About.
what
About how many are we sending out of
of
state?
committed kids?
Yeah, the kids that juvenile probation is not sending to you because they don't think they get the care in your facilities.
128.
So we have 128 Texas kids that need to be in your facility, but because they need specialized care or services, they're being sent around the country.
That's local judicial discretion and probation offices have determined that that's what they want to do.
I find that just unbelievable that Texas sends kids to Colorado, Pennsylvania, New Mexico to receive specialized juvenile justice treatment. And we'll discuss that hopefully in the working group.
Right.
Well, I would just say that there are some things that could be done to reduce the population by the young people that are offending within the institution, and there's other ways to do this. Yeah, there's other ways to move them down the road. I mean, going to TDCJ, they'll be eligible for parole. They'll be treated. They'll go to the facilities that are age appropriate at TDCJ.
No, it's a youthful offender program, and I was over there recently. There was 26 kids that some communities given up on them and certified them as an adult. I was shocked to find several of them are nonviolent, taking a weapon in a place that sells alcohol, a fraud, essentially a white collar, and they're not as tough at the Ellis unit, 26 of them, as most of Ms. Miller Kane's
We have
population.
some of these people classified incorrectly, and I think there's a way to do this.
But if you have a determinate sentence young person that is part of a riot, that is part of a disturbance and injures somebody, why in the world, and we could pull the numbers, would you not take him or her back to court and have the court deal with them effectively? Because if you're not doing that, the word gets out that you're not doing it. Not to mention...
We'll pull those numbers for you.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Two questions. One, you mentioned an advisory review for release. Who's that panel and where's that come from? Is that internal?
Yeah, they're internal. They're a group of folks under our general counsel's office who review all of the cases.
All internal to the system, though?
And yes, so they're returning. Yes.
So the next question I have. So what I'm hearing is we have 5 campuses.
Yes, sir.
There was 92 kids that got out of control. How many kids don't need? How many kids, if you had the contracts today, would you send out of your 854 because you can manage the other kids that are not a problem? I assume you're talking about moving the problems out and leaving the less problems in. Or you?
It would be more of the flip side.
Okay,
I
so
think
you're talking about isolating the bad guys from the other population by contracting out the majority. So how many kids today? If I had a magic wand and could move them all out today, I would move at least 150, if not 200. Of the bad kids. Or are you talking you'd move?
I do believe it's the other way around.
Okay.
I think contract care providers, and I've spoken with several of the CEOs about what it would take to get them to invest in Texas, and it's about consistency.
So of your 850, 150 are kids that you would say probably could be better off somewhere else. So there's about 700 kids is what I'm getting at.
Yes, and if those contract care providers can meet our needs, the problem right now is we're just vying.
I guess
for
my question,
any
you
bag.
kind of answered it. I was thinking it might be in the inverse, but now that you've cleared that up. But do you have a way to consolidate your campus and beef up the infrastructure, the facilities of Senator Flores on that one campus and get your staffing ratio for the tough kid? Can you put? Are you too thin across the facility space?
The staffing is too thin
so you
to
need
be able
a new
to move a
facility
bunch of kids into
to
one
hold-
facility.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you've looked at the operation of the 5 and figured out that you can't move 400 of the toughest over here, make sure it's staffed appropriately, and deal with it.
If there were a 6th facility somewhere that could handle the worst of the worst, that would provide us with an automatic release valve if we can staff it and it's in a reasonably urban center.
For labor issues. Urban is because of labor force.
Yes, to make sure that we have access to labor.
I think we've established that it's going to be real difficult to get the service that all of us want for our youth. Mental health, education, job training, life skills, all the things that they're sent to your facilities to receive and come back a better person. I don't know how you service this population with essentially campuses that are uncontrollable. And in fact, I think we've been real lucky that we haven't had someone's life that was taken. Keeping in mind 2 youth broke out of Giddings, went into the countryside, stole an old folks' car, and went to Conroe. If someone would have pushed back at them, we'd be having another story. I don't think it's, and I want to thank you for one, accepting the job. It's a tough job, and certainly the other officials. But I don't think it's fair, Ms. Kane, for me to come in here, or any of us, and just talk about the problems without a proposal. I want you to think about this. And I'm going to work with my colleagues, and I've already talked to the leadership of the legislature. You're right. You need immediate relief. JD said that. You couldn't even remove kids from Gainesville when it was out of control. So I turned, knowing that we'd shut down some facilities, youth and adult, and you've got a 1995 fairly modern facility in Bartlett, Texas. You've heard about it through the halls, and I've already heard you don't like it, so I'm going to ask you to work with me in the leadership. You have a 1,000-bed state jail in Bartlett, dormitory with 40 individual cells, which I understand you can double up. It's ready to go. We didn't turn the lights off. It takes about $2 million to put insurance in it. You could immediately start depopulating some of your facilities. In fact, I would suggest, we're only talking about a small junior high if you take all of them. You could do that, and I know everybody's going to say, well, what about the 5 locations? I have been in numerous battles, Mineral Wells, Beaumont, Corsicana. I know what it's like to try to shut a community's facility. Although Gainesville said, the city manager, their employees come out of the Metroplex because they can't hire them in Gainesville. So I've got a facility that's ready to go. So how do we deal with closing facilities? I've talked to TDCJ. They're in dire need of facilities for their senior citizens. We've got a waiting list. Not a waiting list, they're on top of each other. They can find 854 geriatric old inmates that are not going to be paroled because of the nature of their crime. You could put them at the existing facilities, use the same employees. First of all, they'll get a raise, modest, but they'll get a raise, and it'll sure be a lot safer environment. I would urge you to think and work as I bring TDCJ with you. The governor's office obviously has to sign on, and all the stakeholders. But we could immediately provide the security, the safety, the services for these youth that they're just not getting. You can go through these ombudsman reports. The kids won't leave the security room. They take it in there and they run to the security rooms at your locations and beg not to go back to the dorm. We could eliminate that immediately. And if you get some controls in confinement, you could take all the professional help that they would ever possibly need.
I would really enjoy an opportunity to discuss it with you. I do have some concerns around safety about putting that many kids in one facility with the inability to be able to move them when they present problems.
How do you defend the community, the size that you have now? I mean, I haven't even gone into the ombudsman report. I didn't want to drag this on all day long, but each one of your locations are understaffed. The gangs are tattooing the youth that arrive, and I'm offering up a safe environment where you can get them the services that they badly need. And you're worried about their safety? We're going to provide them the safety.
Again,
you know what? We're talking about a small junior high, and we haven't even told the staff or the committee. You want to tell everybody how much you spend on each one of those 854 kids per year?
It's a lot.
$160,000. Let me say that again. The 854, you say it's 34 this morning? Mm-hmm. We have for years spent $160,000 per youth. We not only could provide them safety and mental health and the services, we could save the taxpayers millions of dollars. And the communities are going to benefit because they're getting a new client. TDCJ badly needs. We go a long way toward solving the lawsuits over air conditioning because the youth facilities that we're going to take over for adult old geriatric patients are all air conditioned, and that was a major concern of the federal court. So it is a win-win deal. And I'll be honest with you, if I was in charge, we'd do it in the morning because your staff would be safe, the students would be safe, and you and I will make sure that they get the services. And think of the money, the money we save, we could plow back into services for the youth, and then maybe even start attracting some of those vendors that you say we don't have money for. So that's a proposal.
Okay.
It needs a lot of work. Probably can't do it without your assistance. But Brian Collier can testify that facility is safe. It's been used. It's got dormitories. It's got. It's only on 60 acres. The perimeters are protected. You're close to Georgetown, Round Rock, Austin, where you'll get the professional and the correction officer staffing that you need. I really think you need to think about getting rid of the model. You mentioned in your closing while ago, you want to keep them on existing sites. I promise you, I've been here and dealt with this subject long enough to know you will never, ever make those 200-acre facilities safe and sound for the youth and the staff. So I hope you'll work with us.
Absolutely, I'll work with you. I mean, I'm open to discussion on this. I do think that finding the 1,100 in some JCOs, we would need to staff that place.
We'd do it.
100 case managers, 75 docs.
You're not doing it where you
And being able to move those kids and not have them locked down, be able to provide appropriate supervision, and be able to move the problem kids, gang kids who maybe don't reach the level of forest around that facility when you've basically got 2 pods of 350, 400 kids.
Did you hear
in
Mr.
2
Robinson
different
earlier,
buildings.
who I listened to? He said, as long as you've got 30 kids walking between buildings and 10 decide they want to fight, you lose all control. You wouldn't have that at a more controlled environment. But anyway, I don't want to debate you today.
Okay.
I'm making a sound proposal. Your input is valuable, and the leadership of the state, I think, now knows this is a dangerous population that many days is out of control. Many days don't even go to school because it's not safe for them to leave their dorm and go to school. And kids run to the security room, offices, and beg not to leave out of there. I don't know how we sleep another day with that, knowing that that exists, if we've got other options. And I just made a pretty sound one that I will guarantee it will become a state school with all the services that we're not providing now that they so badly need. With that, I look forward to working with you.
Thank you, sir. I do too.
Thank you. Next, I would bring Brian Collier. You might as well give us a snapshot of your agency.
Yes, sir.
Was I accurate on the Bartlett location in terms of its operational? It hadn't been closed down?
Yes, sir. My name is Brian Collier, Executive Director, TDCJ. Good afternoon, Chairman, Vice Chair, members. Yes, sir. We closed the Bartlett facility in 2017. It's a 1,040-bed state jail in Bartlett, Texas. We've had it really run ready all that time because we made sure that we kept it operational in case we needed it for hurricane or another need down the road. So it's pretty well walk-in ready at this point.
Are the clients that would serve there in the past, or even if you used it today, in a controlled environment? I assume that's why you got 40 individual cells. So if someone is violent or disruptive, they can be closely confined?
Yes, sir. There's actually 25 cells, not 40. 25 individual cells on the facility, and then the rest is dormitory housing. The dorms are 54-man dorms that are on the facility, but the cells would, at least in our business, I certainly don't speak for the juvenile, that's a way for us to separate that population.
The current 5 juvenile justice facilities, approximately 834 clients there today. Have you told me you could use that for your geriatric sheltering care? Is there demand within your agency to go to those facilities?
There's absolutely a need for sheltered housing within TDCJ. And sheltered housing, what we would call that, is beds that look like a nursing home or that kind of dormitory-style housing for an older offender that can't really function in general population. We have a request in our legislative appropriations request that included funding for us to create sheltered housing within existing facilities. So we have a significant need, and it's continuing to grow.
You have in excess of 834.
Absolutely, yes, sir.
And and that population is going to grow.
Yes, sir.
And you could go back to federal court. I understand some of my colleagues are making issues about the temperatures, probably assisting the federal court's plaintiffs' arguments, I'm concerned, without a plan. You could take your seniors to these youth facilities, which are air-conditioned, are they not?
Yes, sir.
Okay, well, I look forward to working with you, and I hope I know you'll make yourself available, and I want us to approach I have already, the leadership of the state, toward trying to make this a win-win proposition.
Yes, sir.
You want to give us a snapshot?
Sure, I'll be quick.
You're kind of lucky that you came along after juvenile justice.
Yes, sir. I'll walk quickly through this presentation, but it just gives you a brief overview of the agency, but then also some trends over the last 10 years that I think would be important for you to know. TDCJ, when most people look at TDCJ, they think of adult prisons, but our primary responsibilities really relate to, we have funding and oversight for adult probation in Texas, and within probation in Texas, there's 122 local departments that supervise about 230,000 people on adult probation. That's run at the county level, but we do provide the funding and oversight for those departments. We also operate adult prisons, state jails, and substance abuse felony punishment facilities, and we have 104 facilities around the state that we operate with a population of just about 145,000 offenders. We also operate the parole supervision system, not the parole board, but the actual supervision system of parole, and we have 67 district offices and about 84,000 people under parole supervision within the agency. If you look at slide 2, you just see an on-hand picture of what the incarceration population looks like, just some of the demographics. There's 134,000 offenders that are classified as prison offenders, 7,400 that are state jail offenders, and about 3,400 that are, you see the acronym SAFP, that's a substance abuse felony punishment facility for substance abuse treatment. You can see the breakout, 92% of our offenders are male, 8% female. I'll give you a different picture of that, though. If you look at the state jail system and isolate it, you see 76% male and 24% female within the state jail system. So a little different dynamic as it breaks up as gender. You can also see the racial breakdown of our system, where it's almost identical, third, and third among white, black, and Hispanic offenders. In state jail, you see a different dynamic there as well, with 45% being white, 26% being black, 28% being Hispanic. If you move to the next slide, it just gives you a little bit more detail about offenses specifically. 60% of the offenders in prison are serving an offense for a violent crime. State jail, very different. About 7,400 offenders in state jail, most of which are serving time for a drug or property offense. The average sentence for a prison offender is 19 and a half years, but the average amount served is about 4.2. The state jail average sentence is a year and a month, and the average amount of time we have them is 7 to 9 months in our facility. If you look on slide 4, I'll show you 2 slides, one that shows you decreases and one that shows you increases over the last 10 years. And if you look back over the last 10 years, 10 years ago we had 112 prisons in Texas, and we were leasing beds from county jails. We had a population of over 156,000 offenders. Over that last 10 years, we've dropped to 145,000 offenders and closed 8 facilities. We had 13,000 plus state jail offenders, where now we have about 7,400 state jail offenders. We had 8,800 offenders in what we call administrative segregation or restrictive housing. We now have just over 4,000 offenders in that category because of some of the work that we've done to reduce that. The recidivism rate, as calculated by the Legislative Budget Board, 10 years ago was 27.2. Today it's 20.3, based on the most recent LBB review. If you look on that last slide, and this relates somewhat to those sheltered housing beds that we talked about a second ago, you see increases in the system, things that have actually gone up. One would be the number of offenders on parole supervision. That's gone from 78,000 to about 84,000. However, the number of parolees that successfully complete supervision has gone from 21,000 to 26,000, so that has increased. The number of successful probation completions has also gone up. We've had an increase in mentally ill offenders, about 28% increase in our number of offenders in the system that are mentally ill. That's gone from 24 to 27,000. And if you look at the number of violent offenders, that has increased in the system. But that last bullet is probably the one I would say focus on, because that's really what a lot of the change in the system has been, that our over 55 population within the system has gone from a little over 10,000 to just under 20,000 in the last 10 years. And not caused by a crime wave of people over 55, although about 30% of them came in at that age. The rest are guys who are in the system, big sentences, aging up into those categories. And we have an older portion of the population that is the population that we talk about when we ask for sheltered housing, and when you think about heat, some of those other factors that impact the system, those are the offenders that are more vulnerable in the heat that we have to work with heavy medical needs.
Let me ask you about your problems. You have staffing issues too.
Yes, sir.
Do you not?
Most definitely.
So what have you found that helps?
We started, well, there's not any one thing. It's several things throughout. And what we've done in the past year, we have 26,000 correctional officer positions. We had almost 4,000 vacancies at the beginning of 2018. We went to leadership. Leadership approved for us to bump the initial salary up from $32,000 to $36,000. That allowed us to make ground, and we're actually now at about 3,400 vacancies. So that's helped us improve some.
So I assume raises, bonuses.
We do raises.
All
We also
helps.
do recruiting bonuses. But I will tell you, our retention issues are very similar to what you heard from TJJD. We lose a lot of officers in that first year. Part of the way we wanted to try to address that, we did propose a pay adjustment in our legislative appropriation request that really focuses on retention. Isn't focused on the front salary, more focused on trying to retain those officers after that first year and throughout the career ladder, because we see just during the first year we lose most of those officers. And I would tell you there's a lot of reasons that occurs. Some of it's because they can find other employment at a similar pay that's less hectic. Some of it's because they don't like the work. Some of it's us, frankly, where we are having to work on our retention issues and hold wardens more accountable for retention. But it's a whole host of issues that we have to deal with to try to improve that.
What's your number one problem?
Correctional officer staffing, by far.
That's interesting. Any questions? If not, thank you, and I'll have you in the working group if we can get started in a new model.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Steve McCraw, Department of Public Safety. I guess state your name, who you represent. I didn't ask anybody else, but I think you're supposed to do that.
Yes, sir. Mr. Chairman, Steve McCraw, Director of Texas Department of Public Safety. Madam Chair, Senators, thank you for the opportunity to talk to you about the Department of Public Safety. I'd like to just lead into the question that you had in terms of staffing. We've never been better, and I'd like to take credit for it, but you deserve the credit for it, and the governor deserves the credit for it, because once you instituted a 9-hour, and really a 9-hour workday and a 10-hour workday, which has been codified, what you did, in effect, is because troopers and special agents and Texas Rangers were sneaking around anyway working. Okay, as you get right down to it, you can't work a homicide around the clock and not. And because of that, you enabled us to expand immediately our capacity across the state, and another 600 plus officers just by adding that 10-hour workday to 50-hour work week. At the same time, what you did is it mirrors the federal system of a 9-hour and 50-minute workday on availability pay, and increased our competitiveness across the state. So since 2015, we've hired 1,233 new troopers. We've eliminated all vacancies, and you recall that get beat up here, about 200, 300, sometimes 400 vacancies that we had, and it looked like we're carrying that unused balance to be able to support and pay for certain things, but the bottom line is we didn't have enough people qualified to be troopers. Today, every school, we look at 4,000 people applying to become a DPS trooper. So because of those actions, we've never been in a better position as staff, so thank you. I'll be forever grateful for that, I can guarantee it. And it makes a difference, and I can assure you that, and these are all peace officers, but there's 3 things you got to have. Courage is a no-brainer. You have to have courage, and all do, or you wouldn't put on a badge. You need superior intellect and judgment under pressure. That's clear, otherwise mistakes are made. And you also need integrity. And without integrity, those other 2 don't matter, frankly. And the integrity has to be unswerving in that regard. So it's vitally important, and that's the thing that we've been lucky, or I say fortunate, to be able to attract those type of selfless, dedicated professionals that were willing to risk their lives and will call it like it is. And sometimes, because the world has changed, and over the last decade we've seen crime change, for a number of reasons. It's more diverse, it's certainly less transparent, it's more complex, in many ways it's more transnational, but it's more organized and collaborative. We're seeing gangs that never worked together before now working with each other, working with the cartels, moving ton quantities of methamphetamine into and throughout the state and the nation. These things are going on. Sex trafficking of children has grown. It's one of those crimes, there's no victim reports it, but it happens at the same point. So as it increases, you don't see it in the statistics, so it's less transparent, but it's there. And it certainly is one of the most vile crimes that exist. So what really as a result of the legislature, and the governor in the direction that we received, we've had to move from a reactive posture that was of enforcement. And our first goal was to combat crime and terrorism. Well, it's really about today preventing crime and terrorism. And the same thing, enhancing, highway safety. It's really about preventing, major crashes and loss of life. And sometimes the most important thing a trooper can do from that public safety standpoint is not a DWI. Maybe that day it's changing a flat tire on a dangerous roadway. So all of these things combine in the similar thing in terms as we move into the other aspect of it. We got to be prepared to respond and save lives regardless of what the disaster is. And you saw the actions of the Department of Public Safety and our state troopers, our aviation aircraft, our tactical marine unit that was in the Rio Grande River was in Houston, saving lives. And those things are important. Another aspect of it is obviously, and most important, since you provided it to us, and our number one exceptional item and most important one this legislative session is driver's license. The bottom line we've talked about for years, enhancing driver's license. We really want to enhance it. We need to fix it once and for all. And I can tell you really what programs ought to be. Anytime you give us a regulatory or licensing responsibility, the programs must be effective and efficient. Now, I can say that I do want to, one other thing I want to get off or mention right now before I talk a little bit about the way some of, I talk about the goals, but I'd like to just go over some priority actions as well for the department chairman. But I do want to say one thing is that as relates to this most recent driver's license data, we'll call it, we provided to the Secretary of State. I think it's important for me to say it because I haven't had a chance to testify yet, is that my staff and I went back and reviewed every action since the inception of this project back in March, all the way through and through September and even through January 25th. And I can tell you that based on my assessment, and my staff agrees with me, we should have taken affirmative action on the front end to ensure that we had a senior level person in position to, at the beginning of this project, which was a brand new project. It wasn't mature. It wasn't like some of the other projects we were working with the Secretary of State. And if we had done that, there never would have been U.S. nationalized citizens known to DPS, okay, that was provided to the Secretary of State that would have gone out through the election process and caused the problems that it's causing right now. And I can tell you that throughout the entire project, the Secretary was not involved in any of it because he wasn't there at the time. So every overt action or every action that occurred between March and between when the final, the list was being prepared, the Secretary wasn't even in place at that point in time. So I take full responsibility as the leader of the Department of Public Safety, recognizing there's some complex issues with our data. We're the experts on our data. If we had a senior person in that place, I'm confident that that would not have happened. I can assure you of that. And going forward, as I spoke to even Secretary Whitley this morning, there's things that we can do, and he's going to take a lead on it, and we're going to support him with whatever resources we need in terms of cross-disciplinary approach to be able to do what he needs to do that he's mandated to do by the legislature and law. Would like to note that I've mentioned in terms of migrating away from reactive to proactive, what does that look like? And from a priority action standpoint, we've changed. It's all about, in the beginning of the thing, you got to know, you got to have knowledge. You have to be smart. And you expect us to be able to be in a position to provide accurate and detailed information on the current and future threat environment. And one of the things we do is devised a state intelligence assessment process. Recent products, was the human trafficking threat assessment that I have here, the gang assessment. We did this for 216 different products we provided during 2018. 2018, we also provided over 48,000 analytical assists, over 1,800 situational assessment reports that went out from an intelligence standpoint, so we can be able to be in a position to brief you and the leadership in terms of what those threats are. Suspicious activity reports, very important. Put a system in place not only to track those that are related to crime and terrorism, but also school incidents as well through a web application. Again, it's important to leverage technology and information because at the beginning, we mentioned prevention is where it's at. How you prevent mass casualty attacks is prevention with information. You go back and assess every one of those. There was something out there that if not for could have been looked at, or for some way, shape, or form, it would have been connected, collected, or assessed. We may have an opportunity to intervene at that point and save lives. And I know at least 2 instances in 2018 one in 2017, that attacks on schools were prevented because of parents, teachers, and information exchange with law enforcement. The department was involved in 2 of those. There's no question that an attack had been planned and was prevented in those occasions. That goes back to information. The second priority action for the Department of Public Safety, and I'll use 2018 as examples, is plan and prepare for all contingencies. We have the first ever statewide terrorism exercise that involved all 4 FBI field offices, every joint terrorism task force in the state, and it was complex and coordinated. It attacked 4 different locations in the air industry, schools, and other locations in that regard. We're able to put that together, and that's important because you don't know when the next attack is going to happen. And it was a way to test our con plan or contingency plans for that or any major crime that happens, whether it's a Sutherland Springs or Santa Fe, so we're prepared in that regard. Our third one is to provide direct support to local law enforcement agencies. That's so vital. You've mandated, and it's essential that we be able to provide that support, not just in terms on a daily routine basis what we do, but when they have something that's a gap and when it's the most significant vexing issue in that area, the department has an obligation to assist them with that. And I use an example that DPS pilots assisted local agencies over 7,500 times because of the air assets that we have and use for that. Texas Rangers conducted over 78 officer-involved shootings, over 119 custodial death investigations. DPS special agents conducted over 661 criminal polygraphs and received, at least 78 confessions, and importantly, 6 murders, and the other one were child crimes. We conduct intelligence-driven crime and prevention crash patrols. Again, troopers today, it's a patrol. It's a thinking, pertinent game. You have to be able to know where to put that vehicle, what you're doing at any given time, and working with your locals in that regard. And troopers, of course, there's going to be statistics that come with that. And at 2.9 million stops, 19,000 DWIs, 75,000 crash investigations, 49,000 public assists, 407 child rescues since the inception of the Interdiction and Protection of Children program, because troopers and patrol officers are in a position to detect those signs of human trafficking or pedophilia and are able to intervene and save that child if they're alert and engaged. We have and we can conduct thorough and unbiased investigations. Texas Rangers conducted over 1,400 major crime investigations, made under over 1,000 felony arrests. Public corruption, we had over 511 public corruption investigations in these are just 2018 numbers. Special agents, over 1,800 organized crime investigations, had over 3,200 felony charges during that period of time. Importantly, and I'm going to skip to this and come back because I think it's really what prevention is about, and one of the things, mandates that we've been given, and that right to give you an example, is these combined, coordinated, multi-jurisdictional crime operations. And both chairs were there, on the Rio Grande River, back when we looked at Operation Secure Texas. And one thing you looked at is the intelligence assessments that were happening and operational assessments at that day. And the question was asked, why can't we do these types of operations in Houston? And the fact is we are doing it right now. As a result of requests from the sheriff, as a result from the chief, we got requests because of the increase in violent crime. Well, if you look at where the biggest crime problems, what's the most vexing thing, that's the area we concentrated at. And there's a particular sector that we focused on because of all the takeover robberies. And when you talk about takeover robberies, we're talking about restaurants, we're talking about convenience stores, we're talking about Walgreens, CVS, those types of locations. And even Domino's, pizza delivery. And of course, they're always create a sense of violence anytime you do a takeover robbery. So developing strategies, using our air assets, developing or putting a special agent, violent crime squad, and the tactical anti-gang, or the Texas Anti-Gang Center, and being able to do all those things. I'll use an example. Well, I'll just use the statistics right here. 298 robbery suspects have been arrested. 148 robbery crews were disrupted, and those robbery crews were responsible for 484 robberies. That's obviously a big numbers. We're very proud of that, but importantly, there was a 31% decrease in robberies in that sector.
Let me first acknowledge it. I think all of us think you've got a top-notch law enforcement agency. I think obviously the driver's license is a priority. The data collection is obviously a priority. And I think you've covered enough for us to know how broad and extensive your coverage is. Let me ask you, following the JJJD deal, when your guys go into Houston or somewhere for gang interdiction, what is it? Is it international? Who's recruiting? I had a junior high principal at Cullen, Scott, Senator Boris District. That principal told me his number one problem was gangs, teenage gangs. They're at a city park near the school, and they get in a fight, and they run into the school for safety. What's driving the teenage gang issue, in your judgment or your data?
Well,
I can show you the profile of the juvenile facilities. It's just overloaded with armed robbers.
Right. We have over 100,000 gang members, known gang members in Texas right now, Chairman. And there's no question that in Houston was the first place we put up, and the governor established a Texas Anti-Gang Center there for a reason, is that the gangs, I'd mentioned before, are increasingly collaborating with the cartels. There's more drugs, that it's not only in terms of gangs involved in supporting cartel operations on both sides of the border, but they're moving in and they provide the retail distribution into the cities, in the neighborhoods, where the money comes back to the cartels. So between the confluence of the gangs, along with the drugs that empowers them with cash, and of course this narco-cultural that went along with some of these gangs, which is idea of idolizing the cartels and the violence in the cartels, we've been concerned about pockets of exactly what you're talking about, and the numbers speak to it. Robberies, and if you look at each robberies and dissect them, a lot of these robberies involve 3 young gang members, and 1 senior that's an adult. So often we'll see that protocol. It was I can think of at least 4 of the robberies that I've viewed involved that scenario. One served in a getaway aspect, and of course it's required us to adapt our procedures entirely in terms of how you work robberies. Now you don't work them after a robbery happens. Now you've got to identify the stolen vehicles beforehand, set up on the stolen vehicles, and put yourself in a tactical position to try to intercept them before they go into a store. Because you don't want to expose the public, to a robbery ongoing, and you certainly don't want to take them, if you can avoid taking them outside the particular robbery. So we've had to adjust our entire tactics to be able to do what we did in terms of disrupt that many crews. In terms of the solution to gangs, I don't have any solutions necessarily, other than all we can do from a law enforcement standpoint. Our idea of prevention is to try to prevent them committing crime to begin with.
To wrap this up, what's your number one problem? Problem?
Number one right now is, from an agency standpoint, is being able to provide the service that Texans deserve in driver's license. It's the most visible thing. In fact, nobody sees a special agent. No one sees a state trooper, very rarely, or a Texas Ranger. But they sure see a customer service rep on the front end. And these men and women that toil at $26,000 a year starting pay is ridiculous. And especially, many of them are doing the same thing we used to pay troopers for. And that's, to do driving tests, and look at documents. 80% of what they do today is not driving. It's not even skills test. It's what they do today is identity verification and lawful presence identification. So they become really document experts is what they do. So that and the continued growth of the state of Texas has put us in a position where it challenges. And I can tell you, there's nothing that, these are very proud men and women, and there's only one weapon that we have against that type of, when we're outgunned and out armed at these stations is courtesy. All we can do is be respectful and courteous when someone that's arguably upset for good reasons gets to the front of the line, treat them with dignity and respect and with courtesy. And we need more than that. What we need is, and I can tell you, we try to business process this thing, Six Sigma, re-engineering. There's certain steps that we've been required and mandated by law that we just can't eliminate the sub-tasks. We have to do these things. We have to record these things. And we love to squeeze as much as we can out of it. But I can tell you that if fully staffed, these offices that we have now, and I'm not talking about the additional offices that we most certainly will need with the continued growth in Texas, but just fully staffing the ones we have right now would make a tremendous difference. rural and urban area.
In finance and other meetings, we talk about transferring the responsibility. Are you confident that, given adequate resources, your department can handle licensing?
Well, I know we can. There's no question about it. My only concern about transfer, because frankly, my life would be much easier if we transferred every regulatory function. If we went away tomorrow, life would be much easier. I don't get complaints about Texas Ranger, major violent crime investigations. I don't get those types of things. What we get complaints is driver's lessons. And that said, it's not because of our people. It's because we haven't put them in a position to succeed. Our only concern about recommending that is that I just don't want. It's too important to the state. It reflects on the department, but also reflects on the state of Texas. And how your roads and how we treat people at government office, state government offices, is a reflection of the state of Texas. And so it needs to be done professionally, effectively, efficiently, and in typical Department of Public Safety fashion with courtesy and professionalism.
Okay. Any questions? If not, thank you.
Thank you
for your appearance. Brandon? Where the hell did Brandon go? Yeah, no problem. No, we're going to wrap up here, and I'll finish. Yeah. Okay. State your name, who you represent, please. They better be careful leaving me and you alone to run this committee. Brandon, state your name, who you represent. You can give me the quick version.
Yes, sir. Brandon Wood, Executive Director, Texas Commission on Jail Standards. I appreciate the opportunity to come before you this afternoon. Commission on Jail Standards has the authority and responsibility to inspect and ensure the 241 county jails and facilities under our purview meet a minimum constitutional level of confinement. Currently, there are 23 facilities under our purview that are in non-compliance, and there are approximately 65,000 inmates in county jails across the state of Texas on any given day. Over the past 2 years, we have implemented the provisions of Senate Bill 1849, which included mental health training for jailers across the state. Of the 22,000 jailers across the state of Texas, a little over 11,000 have now received the 8-hour required training. New jailers are receiving that training during their basic jailer course, and we intend to be able to wrap that up long before the actual 2-year cycle of this next legislative session. As far as the inspection and enforcement, we do have 4 field inspectors that are responsible for conducting the on-site annual and special inspections, 1 complaint inspector that handles approximately 200 inquiries per month from family members, inmates, and members of the general public who do submit online and in writing and sometimes via telephone any complaint or concern about a county jail. The provisions of Senate Bill 1849 also created a prisoner safety fund, which was established to assist the smaller counties, 96 beds or less, with installing either cameras or electronic sensors to ensure that jailers were conducting the required rounds. That's in an effort to help drive down the suicides that were occurring in the county jails across the state of Texas. One of the benefits of this has been increased ability to observe any issues that are occurring in facilities, and I believe that it is one of the benefits that has helped these facilities drive down the suicides. Previously, in years past, suicides were averaging 23 per year. At this time, we are now down to 1 per month, and we hope to maintain that for the foreseeable future. That's not just due to the increased training, but the increased awareness that goes along with ensuring that inmates with mental health issues are being addressed and identified as quickly as possible. As far as this next legislative session, we have submitted 3 exceptional items on the House side and the Senate side. Those are being taken into consideration. And with that, I will conclude my remarks and answer any questions that you may have.
I don't think there are any.
Thank you, sir.
I appreciate the job you do.
Yes, sir. Appreciate it.
Made a big difference out there. Thank you. Anyone present, most of the witness cards were people that were invited. Anyone present like testify for or against or be heard today? Or Tara, good to see you. If not, criminal justice stand at ease in recess.